But essentially, back in February of 2018, she's watching the Apothecary Diaries. I don't know what's going on. So there have been some developments since I uploaded my last video about Divergent. Mainly, if you can't already tell, I have Invisalign, and therefore I have a lisp. Now, there's nothing wrong with a lisp. I am just acutely aware that I'm spitting a lot. So if you see anything fly across the screen, I don't want to hear it because I already know and I don't need the reminder. So in light of that, I'm gonna try to make this video as short as humanly possible, which I already think it's gonna be, and you'll see in just a moment. Now, I already posted part 1 of this series where I am reviewing the top YA dystopian novels that were popular in the 2010s. I started with Divergent, so if you haven't watched that video, you can go and watch that now. But we are continuing this series with another YA dystopian novel. So without further ado, hello, welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say. And today I will be talking about The Maze Runner. Now, The Maze Runner is an interesting book because I actually didn't read it before I saw the movie. And the only reason that I watched the Maze Runner movie was because I was a huge fan, and still am, of Dylan O'Brien because I saw him in Teen Wolf and he was amazing. So when I heard he was going to be the star of this new movie, I was like, of course I'm going to watch it. So I watched the movie and then I was like, wait a minute, you're telling me this is a book? Which then led me down that rabbit hole of reading the series. Man, that's really the era we need to go back to. Something about the male characters in YA dystopian movies was top tier. Dylan O'Brien, you too have a special, special place in my heart. Dang, this isn't so much a retrospective on YA dystopian, more so is it a retrospective on all my teenage crushes. But we're not gonna look into that. So before I talk about the actual book, The Maze Runner, there's something that I need to address first, and that is the author James Dashner's sexual assault allegations. This might be news to some of you. This was certainly news to me. I was just looking up James Dashner to see like, oh, what is he working on now? Lo and behold, he has a full spin-off series of The Maze Runner. Like there's the original Maze Runner series, which I think is 4 books. Then there's a prequel, and then I think there's 1, maybe 2 novellas. But currently, like the newest book is about to be published in September. He has another trilogy surrounding the Maze Runner, although this one takes place in the future. He's been putting the Maze Runner IP to work, let me tell you that. But anyway, so I was looking him up just to see what he was doing now, and these allegations came up when I searched his name. Now, I hadn't heard about it at the time because I wasn't really in the online book space. Essentially, back in February of 2018, there was an article published by the school library journal all about sexual misconduct in children's publishing. Already, we are off to a bad start. You never want to hear the words sexual misconduct and children's publishing in the same sentence. But alas, it's an unfortunate reality of the world we're living in. So, the school library journal published an article. Under this article, people were leaving anonymous comments accusing certain authors of sexual assault and harassment. 2 of the named authors under this article were James Dashner and Jay Asher. If you're unfamiliar, Jay Asher is the person that wrote 13 Reasons Why. Now, while Jay Asher vehemently denied the allegations, James Dashner later took to Twitter to make a statement on the issue. Now, one of the people that initially left a comment accusing James Dashner later went back and provided more detail. In their comment, they wrote, "I would like to clarify that the harassment/abuse from James Dashner was not a one-time unwanted touch or a joke I took the wrong way. It entailed months of manipulation, grooming, and gaslighting. He offered to be my quote-unquote mentor using praise and flattery of my writing, and promises to use his connections to help elevate my career to the level of his. But it was all a bait and switch. When I made it clear that I was not going to give him what he wanted in return, our mentorship relationship ended. It took me a long time to realize that every move he made was carefully calculated. He had his manipulation down to a science. I realize now that I was not the first to fall for his tricks, and I was not the last. I feel deeply sorry for everyone who fell for his manipulations after me. I've tried to nudge others and warn on the so-called Whisper Network, but I have always worried that talking about it publicly would harm my career or family. Even typing this is making me sweat buckets. Thanks for listening. In his statement titled A Message from Me to You, James Dashner addressed the comments under this article. Now, he did address the claims rather quickly. I'll have to look at exact dates and times, but from when the article was published and all the comments started to surface to when he made his statement, I believe it was only a matter of days. And this is what he wrote. I have spent the recent days re-examining my actions and searching my soul. Some of the things said about me have been shocking, and my initial instinct was to be defensive. But I also have thought about how numerous women now have come forward as part of a vital movement to lead a discussion about sexual harassment and discrimination in the publishing industry. And I have talked with friends deeply immersed in the #MeToo and #TimesUp movement. I believe all victims must be heard, and I'm committed to listening to them. I've taken these past few days for introspection to see if I've been part of the problem. I think that I have. I didn't honor or fully understand boundaries and power dynamics. I can sincerely say that I have never intentionally hurt another person, but to those affected, I am so deeply sorry. I am taking any and all criticisms and accusations very seriously, and I will seek counseling and guidance to address them. Thank you for listening. Now, I do believe he took a brief break from social media, but from what I can tell, he quickly went back to posting and promoting. If there were any further comments or allegations made against him after the fact, I cannot say. And from what I can tell, the person that left the comment that I just read remained anonymous and never named themselves. And while this person left one of the more detailed comments, there were other accusations that named James Dashner specifically. Another anonymous commenter claimed to have been very close with James Dashner and had known him for years and said that they believed the claims to be true. Again, since seemingly that person did not identify themselves, we don't actually know how quote-unquote close they were to James Dashner. But like he said himself in his statement, all victims deserve to be heard, and I choose to believe victims. I don't think it's my part to accept quote-unquote his apology. Granted, A, I wasn't a part of it, and B, this was 7 years ago. But the only reason I bring up these allegations now is because I think it contributes to my next point, which is there's not a lot of books that are being written for boys anymore. The Maze Runner series was unique not only because it was a huge YA dystopian series at the time, but it had a male protagonist. I mean, if we think of other popular YA dystopian series like The Hunger Games, Divergent, Uglies, so on and so forth, a lot of them have female protagonists. But now, as time moves on, it seems that we're getting less and less books that are geared towards boys specifically. And I'm not just talking about books with male protagonists. I'm also talking about books that simply cover topics that affect men, especially in the fiction space. Now, I don't know how everyone else sees it, but growing up, I remember Percy Jackson, Harry Potter, Ender's Game, the Artemis Fowl series, and so many other books that had male protagonists. And these were, of course, super popular. I mean, Percy Jackson, I don't know when the first book was published, but the fact that we're still getting new content is crazy. Consistently, Rick Riordan will publish a new book and it instantaneously hits the top of the bestseller list. And I love Percy Jackson, but I will say that that is an old IP. Like, we are building upon something that already has a standing in the literary space. And feel free to disagree, but I just feel like there's no real major players in the game when it comes to fiction books geared towards boys. Like, we are getting plenty of new authors, new books, new series that are hitting the top of the bestseller lists, but how many of them are for boys and written about boys? So there is an obvious decline in books that are written for boys, which is an issue that we should be focusing on. Because while nonfiction books are great and can be helpful in certain capacities, fiction books also work wonders at increasing emotional intelligence, which I also made a whole other video about empathy and reading fiction, which you can also watch. But in short, reading fiction allows you to literally put yourself in someone else's shoes, which is beneficial and useful for anyone, but especially young boys, especially when they're in a world surrounded by red pill men. But in general, relegating yourself to only one genre is counterproductive for all readers, not just boys. So if you're someone that primarily reads romance or spice, you might want to think about picking up some nonfiction. I mean, myself included. I read a lot of YA, but I also challenge myself by reading adult literature. I enjoy fantasy, but I also challenge myself by reading horror. I just try to vibe it out a little bit, but the end goal is to read something different, get a new perspective. But the problem is, boys aren't reading fiction because they don't want to. It's because there's no books that are made for them. And while I don't think that boys can't relate to books that have female protagonists or books that are written about and for women, I can also acknowledge that there are certain issues that affect boys differently than they do girls. For example, one of my favorite books is He Forgot to Say Goodbye. This is the same author that wrote Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, and it's a story about two boys who have complicated relationships with their fathers. Now, objectively, the book is good. It's written in such like a beautiful, poetic kind of way, and it really speaks not only to the relationship with boys and their fathers, but also just like their role in a family setting. And make no mistake, this book is written for boys because the lack of a strong male role model can negatively affect boys in a way that it doesn't necessarily affect other kids. For example, in my case, my parents have been divorced for as long as I can remember, and not having my dad present in my home at all times did not negatively impact me. I honestly never felt like I was missing out on anything. I mean, I had my mom. She taught me how to do taxes. She answers my stupid questions about my car. And she scared off plenty of my high school boyfriends just fine. Anyway, all jokes aside, I was able to enjoy this book despite the fact that it was geared towards boys, which what I think in general can really spell out success for a book or a series. I know I bring up this series in like almost every video, but truly it is the blueprint. The Hunger Games has a female protagonist, and yet it is beloved by everyone. The Hunger Games managed to impact a wide variety of readers despite the fact that it is told from a female perspective. Percy Jackson is told from a male perspective, and let me tell you, me and Percy were like that. I was truly like, I just with that dude 100%. Certainly, those two series have specific characteristics that impact certain readers more than others. Katniss having to take over as a mother figure in her family at such a young age speaks to women differently than it would to men. And yet, while it speaks to them, it doesn't also alienate the other people that aren't in the know, for a lack of a better term. And just because I can enjoy books like this that aren't necessarily written for my demographic doesn't mean that I don't want to read books that are written for me. So yes, while we can encourage boys to read books with female protagonists, it's okay for them to also want books with characters that they can more so see themselves in and more so relate to. All that to say, there is a gap in the market for books that are written for boys. So within the existing pool of books that are written for them, we need to be critical, because if there's already a lack of diverse voices amongst this demographic, then what exactly are they consuming? What kind of voices are they hearing from, and what are they saying? Which brings me back to the James Dashner allegations. Now, first and foremost, I am not someone that believes that you can separate the art from the artist. The simple act of creating art means that you are putting something of yourself in your creation. Even if it's something as simple as your time, you put something of yourself into that work. We qualify art because of this unique human element. So we need to be critical of The Maze Runner and any other book that James Dashner writes, because his alleged conduct could very well bleed into these books. Of course, I don't mean this literally. I'm not trying to say that James Dashner is quote unquote teaching boys that assaulting women is okay, but I'm more so questioning his morals and values that could then be projected onto the story. This could be applied to the portrayal of male characters' conduct towards women, as well as how male characters carry themselves in the story. Now I will actually talk about the book, starting with an example from our one and only female character, Teresa. Super fast summary, just a little bit of context in case you don't know what The Maze Runner is about. Essentially, we follow our main character Thomas as he is transported right in the middle of a maze. He finds a society of boys, very Lord of the Flies-esque, where they have created their own little society, and their main goal is to try to exit the maze that surrounds them. From the minute Thomas enters the maze, things start going haywire. Monsters start attacking more. The other boys that live in the glade start saying that they recognize Thomas from somewhere, despite the fact that all their memories are supposed to be wiped. And the biggest change being that a girl is suddenly transported to the maze. Up until now, this society is only boys. They get a new boy once a month, but for some reason, a day after Thomas arrives, a girl is brought up in what they call the box. And I want to specifically talk about the scene when she arrives at the glade. It's important to note that she is comatose and completely at the mercy of like 50 other boys that have not had any interaction with anything close to the outside world in 2 years. When she is introduced, it is made abundantly clear by one of the leaders, Newt. Also love that man. He instructs the other gladers that she is not to be touched or harmed in any way. He even goes so far as to make sure that one of the boys is watching her at all times. Reading that on the surface sounds good, seems chivalrous even, but then rereading it as an adult woman, I had a little bit of a different interpretation. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that this was a conscious choice on the writer's part, but Newt's insistence that someone keep watch of her 24/7, it insinuates that he believes that there is a non-zero chance that if given the opportunity, one of those boys will assault her. This is reinforced not only by the fact that he makes sure that she has a guard, but also that he feels the need to reiterate multiple times throughout the book that no one is to touch her. He has to remind the other boys that they should not put their hands on another person while they're asleep and cannot consent. Even when she wakes up, he has to also remind them, hey, don't touch her. The scene where she's introduced also has the other gladers making crude jokes about her. Someone makes an offhand comment like, I got dibs or something like that. And then later on, after she passes out, because she was conscious at one point, so this is after she's comatose, someone yells, who said Clint had first shot at her? Then, there were several barks of laughter. I'm next. Now, Newt and Albie are quick to shut these jokes down, and they go so far as to say that if anyone is caught doing anything with her, they will be banished, no questions asked. Which, that's great, that's fine. But reading that as a woman and as a human being, I question why were they included in the first place? Like, crazy thought, the jokes aren't funny. We gain nothing by having them included. The only thing it does is make Newt and Albie seem chivalrous by protecting her, which then I would question, why does she need protection like that? She should just be afforded basic human decency. No one should make a move or joke about making moves on you while you're unconscious. Honestly, it's just crazy to me that in this post-apocalyptic world where all their memories are wiped, they have no idea about their past lives, they somehow manage to retain misogyny. Because even later, when Teresa wakes up and she kicks some dude in the balls, Newt makes a joke like, oh my god, you're the first person in the glade to get their butt kicked by a girl. Man, that memory wipe must have extended to me because I forgot how that joke is supposed to be funny. Like, when will we as a society advance enough to stop making jokes about girls kicking boys' butts? Like, that makes me want to laugh about as much as when you ask a teacher if you can go to the bathroom and they say, I don't know, can you? I just think we're more evolved as a society than that. Now, I know some people are quick to say that, like, it's not a big deal, it's not that serious, but like, from a literary standpoint, why was it included? It adds nothing to the story. It tells us nothing about the characters. It doesn't advance the plot. Like, there were so many other things that could have been said in that moment. Like, that break in routine of not having another dude come up in the box is a perfect moment for like banter between the gladers. It was a good moment for like some humorous confusion, but why were they so quick to default to, I'm gonna assault a woman tonight? Even if they weren't gonna actually do it, why would you joke like that? Especially because they thought she was dead until she actually got up and started talking. So again, I would just ask, why was it included? It was so not needed. I could give you so many reasons why it should not have been included. And the only reason I know that some of y'all will give me for why it was included is that it's not a big deal. That's not a reason. I can tell you, it does nothing for the plot, nothing for the characters. We learn nothing about the other gladers except that they're nasty and still manage to retain misogyny. It's crude and it's offensive to women. Like, plain and simple. So again, in a book, and especially the greater series, that is geared towards boys, this is what we're showing them. Now, I don't want to say that this moment speaks to the entirety that is the Maze Runner, because even though these are relatively small scenes, and maybe in passing you don't pay much attention to them, the minute you gloss over something like that is the minute that you are okay with something like this. When you don't really think to stop and consider what exactly it was that these boys were saying, that's how things like this become not a big deal. That's how you become desensitized to passive violence towards women. You'll just pass this off as locker room talk or boys will be boys. And somewhere in your mind, you will tell yourself that this is okay. Maybe it's not conscious, maybe you're not really thinking about it, but somewhere in your mind, that's what's going to happen. Now, I would have to read the entire series to really get a feel for how women are portrayed in the later books, as well as to get a feel for how the boys act outside of a controlled environment. But as it stands, this is not looking good. This is definitely not something to ignore. Now, once again, I cannot speak to the validity of the claims made against James Dashner. They are still allegations, and as far as I know, no formal charges have been brought against him. I can also not attest to the supposed changes and growth that he has made since putting out that statement. The only thing I can do is support victims. Honestly, I'm really sad because I remember this book so fondly. And just in my last reread, the pacing was amazing. The development of all the characters, top tier. And honestly, it wasn't until I got older that I realized that some of the underlying messaging of The Maze Runner is actually supposed to be commentary on the transition from childhood to adulthood. Because as the story goes on, you realize that even though these boys say that they're trying to leave the maze, they don't actually want to. There is comfort and safety in the glade, and they are unaware of what's waiting for them once they leave. And all the boys that regain at least part of their memories tell them that there is nothing left for them. Their fearless leader is so distraught at the possibility of rejoining the real world that he sacrifices himself to a monster. That's how much he didn't want to return, which not only speaks to, yes, the conflict with the transition between childhood to adulthood, but also how that impacts boys specifically. Because yes, while there is change and transition, they take on a different set of responsibility, one that is also paired with the expectations of the patriarchy. Just the way that they have to leave the maze requires a lot of bravery and self-sacrifice, which is what we often demand of boys and men. I mean, we make jokes, everyone's a feminist until there's a spider around, but there is something greater to say about the expectations we put on men. That in the face of danger, they should be brave and fearless. But what's reinforced in the book over and over again is that it's okay for them to be scared, and it's even okay for them to cry. So imagine the bitter taste in my mouth when I see this book reinforcing that masculinity is not just about brute strength or bravery, but also intelligence and emotional intelligence. And at the same time, we're making jokes about assaulting women. Again, there were certain aspects of this book that I really enjoyed, but then to find out after the fact about all these allegations, all this misconduct, it really soured everything for me. And again, I don't know what James Dashner has done since then. I don't know what strides and growth he has made, so I'm going to keep my thoughts on the book brief. Honestly, I would not qualify this as YA dystopian. I think it's more sci-fi, if you ask me. Now, as I said in my other video on Divergent, there's also just a lack of commentary on society in this book. I think it gets later developed in the rest of the series, but again, I actually have zero clue what the rest of the series is about. From what I heard, it turns into a zombie apocalypse? I don't know. Again, there are themes relating to YA, about transition, identity, all that good stuff, as I already mentioned, but there's a lack of commentary and critique on society and societal structures. Like, yes, there's a lot of aggression from Thomas and the other boys towards Wicked, the literal organization that created the maze and put them there, but by the end of the book, we don't really know that much about them or why they even created the maze in the first place. In comparison, I would say that The Maze Runner is better than Divergent. Although what this book makes up for in plot and world building, it kind of lacks in Thomas. Like, his character arc is just like a little hill. It's not like anything substantial, and I don't know if that gets further developed in the rest of the books. But my one thing against him is that, like, he's never wrong about anything. Like, he's kind of not a nice person. He just goes around assuming that everyone else in the glade is stupid. Like, he's constantly like, have you tried X and X solution to get out of the maze? And they're always like, yeah, we did. Did you think we were stupid? Like, he will say the most obvious things, like, did you think about like going into the maze to try to leave? And these boys that have been trapped there for 2 years literally look at him like, Are you joking? So this person comes in, obviously arrogant, thinks they know everything, and then it turns out that they do know everything. I think it would have just been more interesting for his character development if he was wrong at certain times. Like, I know this man's ego is crazy from all the wins that he takes in this book alone. Honestly, guys, I had a much longer analysis that I wanted to go into, but I don't really want to platform someone with these kinds of allegations. I was even planning on making a funny little video summarizing everything in the Maze Runner universe because it's a lot bigger than I thought. All the prequels, novellas, spin-off series, it's crazy. But you know, there's other amazing authors and book series that I could be platforming instead of this one. So yeah, if you were looking for an in-depth review, I'm sorry. Again, while I do think there are good topics in this book and good messaging and themes, it's just kind of sullied by what I know now. And I don't want to like give him too much praise, obviously knowing what he was doing allegedly in private. So with that, that's the end of the video. I will look for another YA dystopian to review in light of the half review I gave for the Maze Runner. Again, it makes me feel icky, okay? If you're annoyed or whatever and you don't like that I didn't actually talk about the book, maybe this isn't the place for you. I value victims, I value their stories, and I don't want to platform against someone with alleged misconduct just for the sake of making a review and making a video. So I'll talk about the issue. I talked a little bit about the Maze Runner, but that's as far as I'll go. If you have any YA dystopian recs, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Did you know this about James Dashner? What are your opinions on the issue? What do you think about his statement? Is there more he could have said? Just let it all out in the comments below. Be sure to follow me on all my social media at Listen to Kristen on TikTok, Instagram, and BlueSky. You can also check out my debut middle grade series called The Magical Morrisons. I now have all the covers up online, so you can take a look at those. All beautiful, all amazing artwork. And if you want, you don't have to, but you can pre-order using the links in the description below. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Honestly, I forgot I had the Invisalign in for a really long time. I'm getting used to this whole talking thing. Anyway, thank you. Bye.